And welcome everyone to our annual general meeting. First, I'd like to kick off with an acknowledgement to country. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather and meet today and pay my respects to elders past and present, and I extend that to respect to elders, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. It is part of our strategic plan to support and better engage with our Indigenous communities, as it really is consistent with caring for country and waterways. Let's just move on to the next exciting thing. Item number 7, the toxic soil update by our guest speaker, Jodie Valpied. She's from the Bacchus, Marsh, Platypus Alliance and the Rural Environment Group. So I'll hand it over to Jodie.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you for having me along to do this this quick talk tonight. I'm actually just going to put my timer on because there's always so much information, the time goes really quickly. So I'm just giving an update on the situation, and I'll share my screen in a bit if I'm able to. So I'm sure most of you are aware that the Westgate Tunnel project is going to be excavating an extremely large amount of soil to create the tunnel. And that soil has been found to be contaminated with PFAS and other contaminants. PFAS is a group of man-made chemicals that are known as forever chemicals because they don't break down. They accumulate in body systems of both animals, humans, and plants as well. And they're extraordinarily soluble in water, unless they've been bonded with something else to make them insoluble. They're very soluble in water. So once they're in a waterway, they're extremely hard to get out, and they will do their best to find a pathway into a waterway if there's water nearby. I'll share my screen. Whoops. Okay, can people see the screen there? Yep. Okay, so at the moment, the government and Transurban are considering where to put this contaminated soil. It's an extraordinarily large volume of soil. Once the tunnelling machine starts, it can't stop, so they have to have everything lined up before they start. The area where they're digging out this soil has obviously been an industrial area, and also there was the Coot Island fire nearby where firefighting foam, which contains PFAS, was used to put out the fire. So Transurban and was warned, and the government were warned a long time ago that there'd actually be a lot of toxic waste in that area. They pushed ahead anyhow. The levels were basically found to be expected to be higher than what was initially anticipated, which is why John Holland and Transurban are currently in court trying to figure that out. One of the sites being considered, and that's actually a forerunner in Transurban's tender process, is in Bacchus Marsh, in fact, right next to our town. So I've just highlighted Bacchus Marsh on the map. I'm sure you already all know where it is. One of the key concerns about this site is its proximity to waterways. To give a bit of a background, back in the 40s, a coal mine started up back when there was a coal shortage, they thought, in the 40s. It was deliberately placed quite close to Bacchus Marsh train station to be able to deliver the coal to where it was needed. The mine never did all that well. It was going to kind of close down, I think, winding down in the 80s. But then it was bought by this group who started turning it into a landfill. That's been operating accepting inert waste, but now they want to expand by 130 hectares right along Parlin Creek to accept the PFAS contaminated soil in what is basically blank paddocks and farmland. Parlin Creek runs along the south and west border of the proposed site, and it joins up with the Werribee River. It's a seasonal creek, so sometimes it runs, sometimes it doesn't, sometimes bits of it are dry. When it does run, it can actually flood. You'll actually get debris coming up quite high. There was a case a number of years ago where Parlin Creek actually dumped sediment into the Werribee River, which ended up in Melton Reservoir and causing a whole lot of problems there. So what goes into Parlin Creek basically ends up in Werribee River, one way or another. This is a little picture of the site. So the black area is the existing site known as Mattingly Brown Coal. They don't deal that much in coal anymore. They deal in soil and related things. The orange area is where they want to put the PFAS contaminated soil. It would be stored in open bays for 21 days at a time, but basically there'll be open bays for 2 years or more with untested soil in it that could have higher levels of PFAS and other contaminants, because they have to store it open, and then it takes 21 days for the test results to come back. Parlin Creek obviously runs along here. There's growling grass frogs, which are endangered all through this area. Just kind of highlighting a few of the key features here. We've got threatened and migratory birds use the area as a corridor as well. There's aquifers under the site which are close to the surface, very close to residences. So there's some hobby farms kind of around here. The town is pretty much the yellow area here. There's a P-12 school. Basically, if you stand there, you can see the site, so it's quite close. A major concern is obviously Parlin Creek then runs through food crops, which are right up to the edge of the creek, then into the Werribee River. So it's all this area, the farmers have water licenses, so they take water straight from the Werribee River. They can take it from Parlin Creek when it's flowing. And also Melton Reservoir is really just off screen, which supplies irrigation to food crops. Basically, Victoria's major suppliers of baby spinach and lettuces, which also go all throughout Australia as well. I think some very high percentage, like 80%, don't quote me on that, but is irrigated by the Werribee River in this area for those kind of leafy greens. I won't go through all this, but basically there's a list of sensitive receptors in the National Environment Management Plan for where PFAS shouldn't be stored. This site has all of those sensitive receptors. It's also got threatened species that come under the Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act, including the growling grass frogs, but certainly not limited to them. The other issue with this site is that the company that runs it is, every time an audit is done, they're non-compliant with EPA conditions, and they also fail from year to year to implement the audit recommendations. So that's just an example there. Doesn't seem to be many consequences for their non-compliance, but we've certainly had issues with them for the past 20 or more years with litter coming out of the site. Farmers have had their crops covered in bits of litter and weird things. There's certainly already issues with them. They're not the kind of company that you want a big contract. So a quick update, where are things at? The site, it's likely, the government basically wants to choose 3 sites. Mattingly Brown Coal, Ravenhall and Bulla, because there's so much soil. I'm sure other groups can update you more on the other two sites, but Mattingley Brown Coal began cell and bunding construction earlier this year without a planning permit. So they've excavated a gully that we believe could contain growling grass frogs, given growling grass frogs are all around that gully as well. Moorabool Shire Council have begun VCAT enforcement proceedings against MBC for that reason. The Victorian government brought in special tunnel boring spoil regulations that override the Environment Protection Act. They did that in July. They basically, normally there's meant to be a public consultation process and all other things that would happen, but they exempted themselves from that. The Environment Minister specifically said that she could not identify any sectors of the public that would be impacted. And it was just that one sentence that exempted themselves, which is very strange because obviously the public have been jumping up and down about this. And those regulations also remove avenues for review of any EPA approval under VCAT if the tunnelling spoil is involved. On the 1st of September, the EPA approved Mattingley Brown Coal's application to receive the spoil. On their report and on the environment management plan, it says that Parwan Creek only contains invertebrates. It makes no mention of the growling grass frogs that are there, even though we've informed them of that, and even though the growling grass frogs are on the database. And Mattingley Brown Coal is very aware that there's growling grass frogs on their property. Very soon, the Planning Minister, Ravenhall has been approved by the EPA today, and that's pretty much the trigger for the Planning Minister to announce his decision. So very soon the Planning Minister will announce a decision. Mattingley Brown Coal their planning scheme doesn't allow them to do all this. So the Planning Minister is likely to intervene and change the planning scheme. Our council's been kind of cut out of that process. What we've been doing, it started out with public rallies, the petition, all the usual things that you'd expect, media. We did species surveys, we submitted reports to the relevant authorities, we pleaded, we begged, we did everything imaginable, lobbied MPs, we've been working with the opposition MPs, we've tried to trigger the EPBC compliance team, and we'll have another go at that because of the excavation of growling grass frog habitat. Now basically our update is legal strategies, which I can't go into in a lot of detail, but we're receiving legal advice and our lawyers are communicating with other people as well. Yeah, so basically we need to get our legal strategies sorted this month. So watch this space. And we're certainly not the only group that are looking down that avenue. What you can do, one thing that needs to happen is that in the Legislative Council, there's a motion to disallow those tunnel spoil regulations. It's up for debate in the Legislative Council, and every time they sit, it gets pushed out because of bickering over COVID restrictions and things like that. So it would be good to put pressure on David Davis, who's in charge of that motion, and the crossbenchers, saying this motion needs to be debated, and you know, they need to progress that. You can have a go at writing to the Planning Minister and DELP about the growling grass frogs and the water quality issues. The more pressure they get, the better. Rumour has it the Planning Minister is not very happy about this situation at all, but he's been thrown under the bus, basically. follow and share the Bacchus Marsh Says No to Toxic Soil Waste Facebook page, and the other sites who are fighting against this idea of dumping things in the West are also have Facebook pages, and donate to our groups to fund the fight. So this has cost me personally, I'd be almost up to 1,000 hours, I'd have to say. I've lost count. It's, you know, many tens of thousands of dollars, and collectively for our communities, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars of volunteer time that has been put in, which certainly we feel like Transurban are choosing Mattingly Brown Coal to save money. They're cowboy operators. That can be the only logical reason why they're choosing them. So they're basically passing their expense onto us as communities at the end of the day. Yeah, so feel free to join and support us in any way you can. And yeah, I mean, speaking of water quality, this is, I think, a huge threat to the Werribee River, because anything that impacts Palm Creek will affect the Werribee River. And I guess on saying that, it's clear from research that there is no cell liner or system that can 100% prevent PFAS from leaching. They all leach eventually. It's just a matter of how long it takes. So that's one big reason why we're concerned. So thank you for the opportunity for that quick update.
Thank you so much, Jodie.